5th edition is famously lacking in rules or guidance for exploration, to the point that there's a bunch of Dungeon Tuber videos saying that D&D Exploration sucks.
Whoa. You made the exact same video, you hack. Am I really supposed to be taking shit from Harry Potter's stunt double here?
Alright, maybe those videos have a point, but I think exploration might be the best pillar of play. Unfortunately, it's criminally undersupported. There is very few mechanics for exploration, and it's tough to introduce them because that's not really what 5th edition is about. So how do you fix exploration? Well, I don't think there's a problem with the game engine. I actually think that if 5e had a bunch of rules for exploration, it would be a worse game. Because there isn't just one type of exploration, there's 5. And which one you use at a given time will define your adventure more than anything else. Welcome to Mystic Arts, where we can confirm the existence of a microphone mimic. This one looks different. My name is Daði, I'm a professional writer and director, and I've been DMing for over 10 years. The worst crime exploration can do is fail at giving you a sense of place. You're not sure where you are or where the other players are, or if you're together. What happens if we go north or south? Where can we even go in general? Does this city have taverns? Are there ponds? What the fuck is going on? I'll call this phenomenon the vague space. And if the 5 types of exploration were a D&D group, the vague space would be the problem player. When you're running a dungeon and everything feels vague, something's off. You should start rendering the scene. Start presenting options, forks, something to do. But you're not sure where you are is a perfectly fun way to do something strange and weird once in a blue moon. How do you run the scenario where the characters are floating around the astral, where travel is done with your brain? Or in Avernus, where travel distances are determined with a dice roll? Or in the Feywild, where believing is seeing, or a dream, or a shattered reality beyond the multiverse. You can be nebulous, use skill checks to believe things into existence, shape reality, or even redefine physics. You can include a guide, like in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, to shepherd the players onward. If done sparingly and handled kindly, I think it can work. Especially if the guide is somehow a vessel for lore and plot information, but tread lightly. The vague space is a shortcut to DM Fiat, and the guide a shortcut to a DM PC, both of which have a long and storied history of letting players down. Still, you can try this in a one-off session or an adventure with a limited scope. I don't think the vague space is a good tool for a long-term adventure. Your party will get tired of nebulousness, of uncertain spaces. As a novelty game mode, it can be a lot of fun, but eventually your players will want some structure. A game with rigor. Which brings me to the Hex Crawl. The Hex Crawl might be the first thing people think of when they're thinking of exploration. It's a defined structure, though not a complex one, that provides a way for your players to move across a map. We just spent the last 2 months making an argument in favor of Hex Crawls. We talked about resource economy, the adventuring day, excursion resting, world maps, random encounters, Hex Crawls, and Hex maps. Those videos aren't important to understand this one, but they're good for further reading when you're done here. There will be links in the description for all of those. You shouldn't use a hex crawl for everything though. They're not a catch-all structure. You probably shouldn't use one in a city, for example.
You're in the print ward.
Okay, we'll head south.
Mark your rations as you enter the Emperor's quarter.
That seems bizarre to me. You shouldn't use it for direct travel between point A and point B either. If the party is traveling along a road between the city of Blackguard and the town of Fullwood, just tell them it takes a couple of days and then cut to Fullwood as they arrive. Or maybe you describe the journey, do some dialogue scenes in the interim, and then cut to Fullwood. But you don't make it into a hex crawl for no reason. Hex crawls solve a problem. You use them when your party is combing through the wilderness, looking for something, or mapping out an area, or exploring their surroundings. Like if the adventurers are searching the Ashwood for the hidden shrine, or if they're going to find the source of the necromancer's curse, or if they're combing through Chult to find Omu. Hex crawls are a type of exploration you use when the game is about wandering around and piecing everything together. It's about picking up clues, discovering plans, and finding your way through the wilderness. If you're planning an adventure with a strict road between A and B, a hex crawl might not be the right solution, because you can't just slap a hex crawl on top of your game. You kind of have to build the exploration elements into the structure, into the bones of your adventure. That's what makes it exploration, the wilderness, and the unknown within it. Something to discover out there. Actually, before we get much further, let's define our terms a little bit. Brief sidebar.
When I say exploration, I'm talking about one of the 3 pillars of 5th edition D&D. Combat, social, and exploration. Exploration is, according to the Dungeon Master's Guide, traversing a wilderness, searching a dungeon, circumventing an obstacle, finding a hidden object, investigating a strange occurrence, or deciphering clues, solving puzzles, and bypassing and disabling traps. I'm not talking about a party of adventurers going from point A to point B. That's not exploration. That's travel. Travel isn't a game mechanic. It's really just sort of a built-in time skip. I don't think there's a way to make travel interesting, unless you're playing a very different game than this stuff. You might think, oh, there could be a random encounter, and you're right, there could be. But that's not exploration. That's combat, a different pillar of the game, almost unrelated to exploration. Especially if it's one encounter in a 4-week journey with guaranteed long rests either side of it, why bother? So if traveling from point A to point B isn't exploration, then what is exploration? Well, there are two answers. One, it's a game about discovery. Two, it's the stuff between combats and social encounters. The glue that holds your adventure together. With that in mind, let's continue.
The point crawl is probably a less discussed format, but incredibly versatile. When I said you can't slap a hex crawl on top of your adventure, you totally could slap a point crawl on top. You could even do a point crawl tonight. Justin Alexander, in his phenomenal book So You Want to Be a Game Master, basically describes it as the London Underground tube map designed by obviously autistic man Hail Gek. Dude loved trains. It's basically like that. You create points, your locations, and connect them with paths, your roads. The perfect use case here is a city. If you're running a big city and you don't know where to start, use points and paths. Standing in Destroyer Square, a point in City Plaza, which is just an area here, you could cross the Shard Lake, a path into the Obsidian Palace, another point. Point, path, point. But that's not exploration, that's just A to B. So the exploration comes in by the directions presented. Standing in Destroyer Square, do you cross the Shard Lake, go to the Obsidian Palace, or do you march up Black Street to the Blackguard Journal? Or take the same road south, heading into Aylman Square in the Citadel Precinct? You don't have to be that explicit with your players, you don't even need to create the whole tube map. Just keep the structure in mind while describing the scenario. Say, for example, the players want to go to the train station in the Argent sector, you could describe the points and paths that lead them there. You cross the bridge over the Red Line River, pass the first bank of Blackguard on Bank Street, and then continue further north into the Argent sector, passing by the Mallory Building and walking towards Grand Union Terminal, where a train is just pulling in. That whole journey might be a soup of proper nouns, but it creates this feeling of verisimilitude as you trace them across the map. The more you play with these descriptions, add details as you render the scene, the further you embed your players into their surroundings. Make them feel like they're in the city. And here's where this is especially powerful. You can reduce anything to points and paths. You can do this with cities, outer planes, big caverns, wilderness travel, mega dungeons, and it gets even better, you can use them as fractals. Basically, nest points within points. Traveling across the continent from Fullwood to Blackguard along the Ashen Road is a point crawl. But when you get to Blackguard, going between districts is a point crawl. And when they enter a district, they get to a new point crawl. When they enter the Shard Lake, there's a point crawl in the lake too. And this isn't something you show to your players, this is just a running tally for how you organize the game in your mind. I use this all the time, almost as much as I use the next type. The highlighted room is how I run a majority of my encounter scenes. Basically, when the party enters a room, I highlight objects like a video game highlights interactables. I describe an object in detail to make it clear that a player can click on it, or rather, that they can interact with it. We already made a video on this topic, and a lot of folks seem to like it. And Deficient Master apparently made a video like that before we did, and now he calls me names. In my defense, I hadn't seen his video. I mean, who can listen to that guy? I'm too distracted by his hairy hands. What's good about the highlighted room is that you can sort of make that structure fit anything. It's best when used on a small scale, rooms, looting bodies, but the principles apply no matter how grand. But as long as you're highlighting objects and creating informed choices, you're good. If your presented options are more than 3, I think you should be careful. It'll just create analysis paralysis. Once you go beyond 3 highlighted objects, it might be good to nest your options within each other. Or if it's much more than 3, you might need another exploration type. If you're stumped on how to describe an object as highlighted, you can make sure to render it in a lot more detail than anything else. Really go into it. Not just say, it's a bookshelf, but something like a dusty silence fills the space between the shelves, each brimming with stacks of scroll tubes, slender volumes, and voluminous leather-bound books. If there's a method in the mad jumble of knowledge, you don't see it. A ladder leans against the end of the nearest bookcase, its first 3 rungs snapped. Whoa, so rendered. I feel like I'm there. That description, along with thousands more, are available on DSCRYB.com, which is the sponsor of today's video. They also do maps and soundscapes. If you want a 30-day free trial, you can use the promo code MysticArts on any plan they offer. There's also a referral link in the description. Go check it out. The Dungeon Crawl is our 5th and final exploration type, and it's iconic. It's the name of the game. Dungeon Crawls are a game structure that's somewhat fallen by the wayside in modern editions, though resurrected by the old-school Renaissance movement. But even still, typical 5e modules all eventually arrive at the point of the adventure, the Dungeon Crawl. They may not use dungeon turns anymore, but they're still essential to the whole experience of any pre-written module. You don't know about dungeon turns? Sidebar 2, I'll be quick.
A dungeon turn is a player-unknown game structure a DM can use to track the passage of time in a dungeon. Basically, every 10 minutes, the DM marks off a box like this one and then asks the players for their actions. They describe themselves opening doors, picking locks, identifying magic items. They spend time in the dungeon that the DM marks down. Every hour, the DM rolls for random encounters or ticks progress for the bad guy's ritual or reduces the loot or something. The idea is that time becomes another resource in the dungeon, something the players will want to conserve when possible. And if you don't track it, you might lose track of it, which is fine. In most dungeons, I don't use dungeon terms, but if I were to run a really big dungeon crawl, I would, as I was saying.
Just about every 5e module eventually becomes a dungeon crawl. Wild Beyond the Witchlight ends with a Palace of Heart's Desire, Curse of Strahd with Castle Ravenloft, and Tomb of Annihilation with a tomb that annihilates your player's desire to touch anything ever again. A dungeon is the quintessential adventure location. It's a structure around which you craft your finale. It's got all the essential game elements baked in, like resource economy, loot, random encounters, a final room the boss lives in, secrets that could be discovered to make your life easier. Dungeons don't have to be underground mazes either. They could be churches, tombs, taverns, palaces, crowded street, busy intersection, a really dank pit. It was pretty good in Ocean's 11. A dungeon is just a series of encounters, scenarios, puzzles, and characters. It's an adventure location. The shape doesn't matter, and a room isn't a room. It's a little scenario. It's last on this list of 5 because it's where the other exploration types send you to. It's the end point of the adventure. You explore around, you find out there's a cult, you find out that the cult is up to no good, thwart the cult's plan to skin the president and sacrifice him to the screaming mass, but then, at the end of all that, you have to go put an end to the cult. So you go to where the cult is held up and introduce them to super democracy whether they like it or not. If dungeons sound awesome, on this channel during the month of May, we'll be uploading loads of videos about dungeons. This phenomenon was named by one of our subscribers, Bearcat18, as Dungeon Mayhem. My goal, by the end of May, I'll make you love dungeons. So subscribe and stick around. I'm a big believer in trusting the medium of the media. Or, in other words, I believe that any piece of art has its place in a medium, and not much beyond it. So, for example, Lethal Weapon and Limitless were fun movies. I have watched them many times. But the TV shows were almost destined to fail because the premise of a movie and the premise of a TV show do not translate well to each other. TV shows need to have a story engine. The USS Enterprise goes to new worlds and explores them. As a film, it usually becomes the USS Enterprise is the most important ship in the history of this galactic war that might start. And Trekkies shrug. I think Hamilton would make for a fairly bland movie, but I think it's an amazing theater production. Video games make for bad movies, and movies make for bad video games. The medium matters. This is also why I prefer D&D in person. I believe the intended medium is the table, not the screen. I spend enough of my time in front of screens. The intended medium is looking people in the eyes and creating an electric atmosphere in a room together. But that's neither here nor there. Picking the best medium for something is important. When you're making your adventure and you're thinking about adding in exploration, make sure you pick the one that's most suited to your needs. Pick the right medium. If you're exploring a wilderness, use a Hex Crawl. If you're exploring a ruin, use a dungeon. If you're exploring an alien plane, use the vague space. And I guess any of them could be a point crawl or a highlighted room. Those are very inoffensive mediums that will get the job done kind of no matter what. Of course, there are exceptions to mediums. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy started as a radio play before it was a book. Maybe you've got that Douglas Adams genius and you know just the way to run a city like a Hex Crawl, like Coruscant, or run a mega dungeon like a highlighted room. I've done both of those things, and it can work. I did say at the start that you don't need systems, and they'd make it worse. And then I mentioned some structures, which are a kind of system, so yeah. Obviously, there's good systems for exploration, not even complicated ones. My system for Hex Crawls is only 3 pages, unless we include the charts for rolling for weather. A small, unintrusive, DM-facing system like that can be useful, but that's not what making exploration fun is about, and a system wouldn't make it better. The point of this video, and probably every video I make about exploration, is going to be exploration is about discovery. Discovery isn't a game mechanic. You don't roll to explore. You might roll to see a particular thing or spot a clue, but the gameplay of exploration should be in whether or not you discover something, which is also why exploration support is so poor. Because if the books told me how to run that feeling of figuring it out, I'd like it less. The more they'd systematize it, the more they'd rob the discovery. Discovery is the fun of finding stuff out, solving problems without your character sheet, and using your big, wet head muscle. You can go crazy with these exploration types that we talked about too. You can glue them together to create an epic campaign. It may be a point crawl in the city and another point crawl on the road to the frontier town. But leaving the frontier town is a hex crawl. And in a hex, there's a dungeon. In the dungeon, there's a highlighted room, which, if clicked, has an entry into the Underdark, which is another huge point crawl that leads into the Abyss, which is a vague space. In between all of that, you construct your combat scenarios by using the 8 types of combat and the 12 combat objectives before ejecting your PCs back into the exploration. You nest, layer, connect, and all the while you weave together the epic tale that your players will create together. Exploration is the shape of the adventure. Everything else is the content within said shape. The more you use these tools, the easier it will be for you to play around. Find the right tool for the right scenario, and you'll realize that exploration isn't the worst pillar. It's your pillar. It's exactly as good as you make it. And that's where we'll pick it up next time. Thanks so much for watching this video. This channel is run by me and my girlfriend. And if you want to support us directly, consider joining our Patreon. This month we'll be putting up some dungeons. To start us off, you can find a free dungeon called All Hail Gek. If you're feeling especially generous, you might like the video, comment, share, or subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, keep studying the mystic arts.